Please, forgive me. Forgive me, please. I will never mock you again, I promise. I will never insult you again. Ngozi begged, but Adamu, a popular beggar, had had enough and refused to listen to her pleas. He had warned Ngozi never to insult him. He had reported her to her parents, but she refused to listen, despite Adamu's threat to deal with her if she doesn't stop. But Ngozi would always say, "What can a poor beggar possibly do to her? She has a good job, she's beautiful, and she's a daughter of a military man." But Ngozi never knew it's not every beggar on the street that doesn't have a means to fight back. Adamu had endured Ngozi's abuse and constant mockery and insults for over 3 years. He had been living on their street and begging for alms in the neighborhood. But that day, he chose to fight back and teach her a lesson she will never forget in her life, if he ever chooses to forgive her and free her from the bottle. Adamu was an ambitious young man, a mechanical engineer, but 10 years after graduation he couldn't get a job, even at the age of 40, with no wife, no children, and his life seeming to waste away. He wanted to venture into farming, but he had no money and no one was ready to help him. One evening, while sitting in his room, thinking about the next step to take, he received a message from the international oil companies in Port Harcourt for an interview the following day. It was a dream come true, and he had hoped God had finally answered his prayers. He took the night bus from Kano and was in Port Harcourt the following morning. He dressed in his only suit, carried his file, and entered a taxi going to the company. Minutes into the drive, he heard a loud sound, and that was all he remembered. 1 month after he woke up in a general hospital, his eyes were widely opened and clear, but he couldn't see. When he touched his head, he felt a big bandage wrapped around it. He wanted to stand up, but he couldn't carry his legs. That was when he realized he had lost it all. He couldn't hide the pain and shouted, calling for help. The Good Samaritan, Musa, a young man who volunteered to stay with him in the hospital when they couldn't reach any of his relatives, told him to calm down, as he believed God will not forsake him to waste away. Adamu calmly asked his new friend how long he had been in the hospital, and was shocked when he told him he had been in a coma for 1 month. Musa told him the doctors tried their best and admitted him and had been giving him free treatments, but they couldn't carry out the surgeries that would have saved him from losing his sight because nobody could pay for him. 1 week later, he was discharged from the hospital when the management couldn't pay his accumulating bills anymore. To his greatest surprise, he raised his legs and miraculously he could walk again, but he still can't see with his eyes. Musa took him to his house, and a few weeks later he appreciated all that he did for him and decided to leave because he was seeing himself as a burden on the young man, even when he told him to stay. Adamu ended up sleeping under the bridge, begging for alms. With time, he learnt to find his way around. One morning, he discovered he could barely see objects, but his vision was still not clear enough to consider looking for a job. Adamu ended up at a street where a beautiful lady, Ngozi, lives. Since the first day Ngozi saw him, begging her for alms with flawless English instead of trying to hear his story, Ngozi chose to mock him. How can a grown-up man like you with 2 hands be begging a woman for help? See your big hands and your legs? Even speaking good English, can't you be ashamed of yourself? If I see you here again, I will make sure I embarrass you and chase you from here. Adamu thought she was joking, but Ngozi carried out her threat the following day. With her friend, Ngozi mocked and insulted him. She stretched her hand to give him jollof rice she bought on her way from work, and when Adamu wanted to collect it, he poured it on his shirt. So you actually think I am going to give a lazy man like you food? You must be a joker. She laughed with her friend Amara and left. Adamu stood there with tears in his eyes. The memories of what brought him there came back again. He couldn't control his tears when he remembered how he would have been working as an engineer, and how he ended up being a beggar in Port Harcourt instead of working for the International Oil Company. The abuse from Ngozi continued every day, but Adamu resolved not to leave there because of her. He wasn't the one that caused his condition. It was a test from God, he believed. That morning, Ngozi heard a knock on their door, and when she opened it, it was someone she hated most standing. It was Adamu, and without thinking twice, she went inside, brought a bucket of water and emptied it on his head. He stood there drenched and couldn't utter a word for a while. It was the noise that forced her parents to come outside and saw the popular beggar in the neighborhood drenched and being insulted by their only daughter, Ngozi. Adamu narrated how Ngozi had been abusing him and only came to report her when she poured dirty water on him again, while her mother took sides with her. Her father, Mr. Obina, a high-ranking military officer, apologized and begged him to forgive her. Before leaving, he gave him some cash, which he rejected, but after several persuasions, he accepted it. It was after accepting the money that Ngozi burst into laughter. "I knew it. That's why you traced my house and came begging again this early morning. You claim to be a blind beggar, but you suddenly know the road to my house. Lazy man. Like you, instead of finding work to do, you are being lazy, begging up and down." Her father, Mr. Odnina, almost slapped her and dragged her inside. Just like Ngozi, her mother never scolded her and rather said people like Adamu need to be shamed publicly to stop being lazy and get themselves busy, even when she doesn't know his story. That evening, as Adamu returned to the underbridge where he was living, he concluded he had had enough and prayed to God to give him the power to deal with Ngozi, to teach others a lesson. "God, if I did this to myself, allow this humiliation to continue, but if this is a test from you, give me the power to deal with this lady that has continued to humiliate and cause me pain." As he slept, he had a dream. In the dream, he was holding a glass bottle, standing beside a big tree. A big snake tried to bite him. He just raised his right hand towards it, and the next thing, the big snake shrank and was inside the bottle he was holding. He woke up in the middle of the night, panting and scared. As he woke up, from nowhere he could see the exact bottle he saw in the dream beside him. Because of his sight problem, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. He shifted and touched it, and there he realized it was the same bottle he saw in his dream. It was at this moment Adamu concluded that it was a message on how to handle his enemies. "I see, Ngozi is really the snake tormenting my life, and this bottle, it's a gift from God to handle my enemies in my own way," he said to himself. In the morning, he carried his walking stick and then the glass bottle, and was ready to go in search of his daily food. "I am not a bad person. I never imagined I would end up as a beggar despite being one of the brightest students in my time, but this is where life has placed me. Ngozi, I have tried enough to handle your humiliation, but since you have refused to leave me alone, today will be the last day you will ever humiliate me. That's if you come out alive," he said, and headed towards his usual spot where he stayed and begged for alms. Just 10 minutes after he arrived, he saw Ngozi coming again. As soon as Ngozi saw him standing, begging people to help him, she came for him again, despite being late for work. "This lazy man, are you not ashamed of yourself? What do you really want me to do to you before you stop this laziness and get yourself a job?" he said, spitting on him, and turned to leave. "Ngozi, I have heard enough of your madness, but today you will learn beggars too are human beings, and they have a God who fights for them. You will learn today that not all beggars are lazy. You will learn to mind your business and never judge anyone you don't know their stories." He hadn't finished when Ngozi hissed and further insulted him. "What can a poor lazy man like you pretending to be blind possibly do to me? Do your worst, let me see." Adamu simply raised his right hand towards her, and within a second, Ngozi shrank and was inside the glass bottle he was holding. Adamu was no longer the simple, easy-going beggar. His eyes turned red, and he held the bottle with all his strength, ready to break it. Inside the bottle, Ngozi cried and begged for his forgiveness, promising never to insult or mock him again. "Please forgive me. I am sorry for everything I ever said to you. Please forgive me, and you release me. I will never mock you." But Adamu wasn't ready to listen to his cries. "I warned you, but you were adamant. You humiliated and embarrassed me even when I didn't cause you any harm. Do you know my stories? You never cared to know, but today you will learn your lesson in a very bitter way." Adamu carried the bottle and covered it with his dirty clothes, going about his business. In the evening, he carried it to the underbridge where he was sleeping, but he could still hear Ngozi's tiny voice from the bottle, begging for his forgiveness, crying for food in the intense heat in the small bottle. But he doesn't care. "You see, if you die inside there, I will simply throw you and the bottle away. After all, nobody saw me when I took you inside the bottle." The heat and the pain inside the bottle were something Ngozi had never experienced in her life. She silently prayed to God to touch the heart of Adamu and forgive her. Meanwhile, Ngozi's parents waited for her to return from work, and she never did. Late in the evening, her parents went to make a report of a missing person in the police station nearby. They couldn't sleep and silently prayed she wasn't taken by kidnappers or ritualists. Early in the morning, Adamu checked the bottle and discovered Ngozi was still alive but struggling to breathe. He covered the bottle with his dirty clothes and went to Ngozi's house. Her parents rushed outside when they saw him. "We are looking for our daughter. Hope she didn't offend you again." "Ah, that's why I am here. Your daughter is not missing. She's with me." Ngozi's mother wanted to slap him, but her husband stopped her. "Are you out of your senses? Can't you be patient and hear him out?" he said. "Sir, I am only here because you are a good man. If not, I wouldn't have come here." He brought out the glass containing Ngozi, who was struggling to breathe and begging for help. Ngozi's mother couldn't handle it as she collapsed to the ground, crying and begging Adamu to forgive and save their only child. Within seconds, Ngozi's father fell to his knees too, begging Adamu for forgiveness. He simply opened the container, raised his right hand, and Ngozi came out of the glass bottle, unhurt but very weak and unable to walk. Her mother rushed inside and brought water and food for her. After feeding her for a while, Ngozi turned slightly towards Adamu with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for forgiving me and giving me a second chance to live again." After some minutes, she regained her strength and stood up. She begged Adamu to come inside with her parents. While inside the living room, Adamu narrated his story and how he ended up being a beggar in Port Harcourt when he was supposed to be working as a mechanical engineer. "I graduated as the second best overall student in my set 10 years ago. I had a dream of working for an international oil company and turned down a few offers I had because I was sure of working with them with my good result. But after trying several times and failing, I visited the local companies who had wanted to hire me, but they too rejected my applications and always said there was no vacancy. I was tired and frustrated, having graduated late from university at the age of 30 years. Time was not on my side. I wanted to venture into agriculture, but there was no money and no one was ready to support me. My parents are late. They died when I was 10, and as the only child, I had no one to support me. I funded my own secondary education and the university, but I don't know why life has always been unfair to me. 3 years ago, at the age of 40, I finally received a message from the International Oil Company inviting me for an interview. I boarded the night bus from Kano to Port Harcourt, hoping my prayers had been answered. Unfortunately, the worst thing happened to me. On the day of my interview, I was in a taxi going to the venue when the car had a terrible accident. I was in a coma for 1 month, and when I woke up, I had lost everything. I lost my sights. Instead of working as an engineer for an international oil company in Port Harcourt, I ended up being a beggar on the streets of Port Harcourt. I was never a lazy man like Ngozi thought, but she refused to even hear my story and judged me wrongly. Right there, Ngozi burst into tears, realizing how wicked she had been towards him when she didn't know his story. As she cried, she stood up, and to the amazement of her parents, she embraced Adamu despite his dirty clothes. To her parents' surprise, Ngozi knelt down in front of Adamu and said, "Will you do me a favor?" What do you think will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to watch the part 2 when we upload it.